I want to make a bowl, but I don't have a lathe. I also want to minimize the amount of timber I need to make the bowl, and I want to generate as little waste as possible while I'm making the bowl. And the third consideration is I'm going to try and minimize the amount of equipment I use in the workshop so that you could follow these steps and make the bowl yourself. This video is going to nip along at quite a rate of knots, so if you're ready, let's begin. I start by cutting some MDF down to size to make the jigs I need for the router. Then I mark the centre of each piece so I can locate my quick and dirty circle cutting jig that I've made just to make these bowls with. I've put hardly any time and effort into making this jig. In fact, as you can see, it's a piece of leftover flooring, a nail and a hole, because in my very next video I'm going to show you how to make the creme de la creme of circle cutting jigs for your router. So make sure you hit the subscribe button now. The jig to route the inner wall of the bowl is made up of two pieces of MDF screwed together. One piece has a larger hole cut in it that's the same size as the outside of the bowl, while the other piece has a slightly smaller circle cut in it, which is the size you need to route the inner surface of the bowl. Using another piece of MDF as a baseboard, marking the orientation just in case I don't get everything lined up perfectly, I drill holes through them all and then install captive nuts in the baseboard so that I can bolt everything together, keep everything nice and securely in place when I'm ready to route the surface of the bowl. Jig's complete, now we can make the bowl itself. So I'll prepare my timber in the usual way, surface plane one face, one edge, run it through the thicknesser and then cut it down to the exact size I need on the table saw. If you've bought your timber from a local timber store and it's planed all round, then this is the point where you're going to want to try and match the grain as much as possible. If you've prepared the timber yourself, then you want to mark it now so that you can ensure you get the grain flowing all around the bowl. And this is also the time when you need to choose which you're going to have as the face, the outside of the bowl, and which you're going to have as the inside. Bear in mind you need to consider the entire circumference of the bowl. So on this side of the timber I've got some lovely grain pattern here, and it ends up a little bland at the left, my left. On this side I've got some lovely grain pattern on the top piece, but the bottom piece is quite bland. It does match, it is in the right orientation, but I'm inclined to think that side's going to be the best for the outside. So keeping the timber that way around, I'm going to take the opportunity now to mark it in more places than it really needs, just to make sure I don't muck it up and lose the continuity around the bowl. I'm going to be using my miter saw to cut the angles. I've preset it to 22.5 and I've got the timber orientated with the outside face towards me, and I'll be cutting the angle with the longest edge on the outside face. With the first angle cut, I can measure back, mark for the second angle, and then line the piece up with the blade and set a stop block so I can guarantee each piece that I cut is going to be exactly the same size. As you take each piece off of the saw, make sure that you turn it back up the right way again so everything's in the right orientation when you come to glue up. Now turn the timber over again so the outside is facing you. and recut the angle on the right hand side of the next piece, so the longest edge is on the outside of the timber, and that way we can keep the grain flowing all the way around the outside of the bowl. Now repeat these steps until you've got all 8 pieces cut for the first circle. Place all the pieces that you've just cut on a nice flat surface in the correct order. Now turn them up so the longest edge is facing up, and use a piece of masking tape to keep them all together. I did mine in 2 halves. Now turn them the other way up so you can apply the glue to each end. Turn them again so they're the right way up, assemble them back into 2 semicircles, bring the 2 semicircles together and tighten them down with a strap clamp. It's well worth taking a little bit of time here to make sure everything's as flat as you can get it, and then you'll have less to sand or flatten once the glue's dry. This is the ideal time to cut the pieces you need to size for the base of the bowl while you're waiting for the glue to dry. Sand the top and bottom surface of the octagon so they're nice and flat, and then bolt the outer wall jig in place. With the jig secured firmly on top of the workpiece and the guard bush installed in the router, you can now proceed to remove the waste material from the outside of the octagon, taking nice shallow passes so you reduce any chance of tear out and tipping the router. With the outside wall of the bowl cut, you can now use the inner wall jig to cut the inside wall of the bowl, again making sure it's securely fastened to the baseboard. Again, take in shallow passes so you reduce the chance of tear out and tipping. Repeat the procedure on the second ring and then glue the 2 together. While you're waiting for that glue up, you can prepare the baseboard. Remove any glue snorts and sand it flat. Remove the bowl walls from the clamps and sand. Take this opportunity to sand the inside wall of the bowl so that it's ready to take finish, because once the base is on, it's going to be an awful lot harder. I sanded both the inside and the outside walls at this stage. Now take the freshly sanded walls of the bowl and place them on top of the base of the bowl, and draw a circle all around the outside of the bowl walls. You need to remove as much of the waste material as possible, And you could use a bandsaw or a jigsaw or a coping saw or whatever you've got to hand. I decided to use the bandsaw. With all the waste material removed from the base of the bowl, you can now glue the walls and the base together. Once the glue's dried, trim the base flush with the walls of the bowl using a bearing guided flush trim bit. And sand. I used 120 and finished with 180 grit. With everything sanded, you can then put a round over on the base and the top, outside and inside edge of the bowl, whatever size you prefer. I went with a 6mm, I think it looks good. And then of course, a little more sanding. And finally, time for the finish. I've chosen mineral oil as it's food safe, and also because it makes the grain pop. And this is where ash absolutely comes to life. Just look at it, beautiful. I think you've got to admit, that is absolutely stunning. Well worth the effort to get that grain flowing all around it. Gorgeous. And I think I've achieved the criteria I laid out at the beginning of the video. Minimum amount of wood, minimum amount of wastage, minimum amount of equipment required. And I think I've ticked all 3 boxes. Taking that extra little bit of time and effort to make sure the grain matches and flows all the way around the bowl, I think makes it and takes it to a new level. And I hope you do too. So if you want to make this bowl yourself, I've got detailed plans available online listing every step, so I'll leave a link to that in the description below the video. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then please give us a thumbs up, and why not subscribe to the channel so you can see what else I get up to here in the workshop. Thanks very much for watching, and see you next time. Ta-ra.